first, what I want to do is go through a few pointers on why SQL is important and why we're going to be learning it today, and a bit of details about the data set that we're going to be looking at. So first thing that we're going to look at is it goes without saying that spreadsheets are one of the most important data tools out there. There's this meme that I really love of Microsoft Excel holding on its shoulder the entire world banking system and economy, because in a lot of ways it's true. All of us use Excel, all of us use spreadsheets, and in a lot of ways it's an indispensable tool for any type of data role. However, in a lot of different ways, SQL can also be a great alternative to using spreadsheets, especially when you have data analysis that you need to run on a regular and consistent basis. So, what's possible in SQL and what's possible in spreadsheets, there's a lot more that can happen in SQL than you can do in spreadsheets, and vice versa, to be fair. You can't create visualizations in SQL, for example. So these four tenets here that we talk about of what's possible in SQL is automation, efficiency, scalability, and reliability. So we're able to automate a lot of data that we query and a lot of pipelines, data pipelines that let you extract and transform data into kind of ready for analysis or analysis ready data. SQL is more efficient. You see, for a lot of use cases, SQL runs a lot more quicker than performing data analysis on Excel. It's scalable, so this comes here in the concept of big data. Excel does have a row limit. SQL does not necessarily have a row limit, and it's reliable. So, I've been a supply chain data analyst in the previous role. One of the main tasks that I've had was maintaining a Excel spreadsheet that needs to be updated every week with full of predictions and forecasts that is really complicated. And in a lot of ways, had that sheet been completely ported to SQL, it would have been way easier to maintain and less likely to break, as it's a simple code change rather than formatting updates or potential errors with formulas within a cell that are hard to interpret. So we're going to be walking a lot through that, and we're going to be working with a data set today on the Airbnb listings in New York until 2020. And we're going to pretend we're Airbnb data analysts working in SQL. In a lot of ways, a lot of Airbnb data analysts do this exact work that we're going to be doing today, probably on more complex data sets that are less, publicly facing in a lot of ways, but nevertheless, it's a really good mimic of that workflow. And we're going to be answering questions about that data set. Specifically, we're going to be answering questions on the top 10 most reviewed private rooms in New York. What are they? What are the cheapest 10 private rooms in New York? What is the average availability of a private room in New York? We're going to look at which listings have an availability of fewer than 30 days a year, but have fewer than 10 reviews. We're going to look at the average number of reviews per room type, ordered by the average in descending order. And we're going to look at what is the number and average price of listings by room type where such listings are available for more than 250 days a year. If a lot of this is not necessarily clear to you at the moment, that's completely fine, because we're going to clarify the data set as we go along, and we're going to work with it in DataCamp Workspace. So let's go for the live code along. Just a bit of housekeeping here. Reese will be sharing in the chat a link to your own duplicate notebook that we're going to be running today. So essentially, DataCamp Workspace is a cloud-based IDE. Once you press on your own link, you'll be able to open your own Workspace notebook for this code along, and you'll be able to code along. If you don't want to code along, that's also fine. You can just follow along, and hopefully you'll get something out of it. So Reese will be sharing the link below. It's in the resource section. Do check it out. And I have the Workspace open right in front of me. So if you get lost in the Workspace, all you need to do is press on Files. Here, what you'll have is you'll find the data that we'll be using today. You'll be able to access the solution notebook. So in case you get stuck, you'll be able to jump in immediately on the solution notebook and check the results and the actual solution code. The notebook is where we'll be coding along. So I have an empty notebook here in front of me. And if you want to download the slides, they are available here in PDF as well. So I'm going to close this pane here, and we're going to be back to the notebook. So I'll go in a bit more depth on the data set that we'll be using today. So the data set is called Airbnb underscore data.csv, and it contains data on Airbnb listings in the state of New York. And it contains the following columns. So what is the unique ID of a listing? And that's a number. The description. So that is the description that we used on the listing. This is a 3-bedroom apartment. It looks like this. It looks like that. The host ID, so the unique identifier of a host. Uh, Neighborhood, which is name of boroughs in neighborhood. We're going to look at what that data set looks like. Coordinates, which is the coordinates of the listing set in latitude and longitude. Listings added, so the date of added listing, so when we added that listing on Airbnb. The type of room, which can be like a full apartment, a house, a private room, etc. The rating from 0 to 5, so the ratings other Airbnb tenants have given this room. The price per night for listing. So this is, as explained, the price per night for a listing. Number of reviews, so the amount of reviews it has received. Reviews per month, number of reviews per month it has received. Number of days available per year, so how many days on average is this listing available a year. And number of stays, so total number of times this room or this listing has been occupied by an Airbnb customer. And we're going to answer, as I mentioned, these 6 questions. But before we jump into answering questions, let's sharpen our SQL skills. Let's get acquainted with SQL, especially for those who are working with SQL for the first time. What I love about SQL is that it's a very verbose language. And what I mean is that when you work with SQL, it's actually pretty logical or clear from the type of commands that you're using, what the expected outcome is. It's a lot like using English to query data, and we're gonna look at it in a bit more depth and how we're gonna practice it and how looking at it in practice. So let's look at kind of some of the key um, some of the key um, some of the key commands that we see here. I'm getting quite a few people that are saying that they cannot access the workspace. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make another copy link. And I'm going to send it over to Reese in case that we cannot do checkout. And then maybe it will be able to work it out again. So yeah, getting quite a few people that are saying they cannot access the workspace. So we're on it. We're going to figure it out. In the meantime, do follow along. So we're just going to send it over. Sorry about that. With that said, let's go back to sharing our screen. So we sent it over. We're going to figure it out. But in the meantime, this is just like a 10 minutes where we're going to go through the code along, conceptually at least. We apologize for that. We will have that fixed shortly. So with that said, we're going to look at some key commands here related to SQL. The first one being select, which returns all of the commands, all of the columns, especially when you use select star or specific columns. We're going to look at from, which specifies the table that the data should be returned from. We're going to look at the limit command, which lets you limit the number of rows returned. We're going to use the as command, which lets you set an alias for a particular column. We're going to use the order by, which lets you order the data. We're going to use where, which lets you filter on a specific column or value. We're going to use group by, which lets you aggregate on one or more columns. And then we're going to use max and average, which lets you return the maximum amount of a particular column and the average of a particular column. Now, if all of these commands are not yet clear for you, we're going to practice them just shortly. If you're not able to open the workspace, do let us know. We are working on it at the moment, but for now, do follow along. And as I mentioned, once you have access, you'll be able to jump into the solution notebook directly. One more thing as well, you'll see here that there are already a few text here in the cell. These are comments. So in SQL, you can have either inline comments by using the double dash. So this is used for short, quick notes. Or if you have the slash button, which lets you do multi-line commenting, right, without quotation mark. But with that said, let's jump in directly into some SQL practice. So what we're going to do at the beginning is we're going to select the first 10 rows of all the columns from the Airbnb dataset. So what I just want to see is the first 10 rows in the entirety of the dataset. And to be able to do this, I'm going to do select star. So by saying select star, what we're saying here is I want to select everything from, and this is a nifty feature of DataCamp Workspace, is that you can query via SQL a CSV file directly in your directory. So here the name of this CSV file is Airbnb data.csv. I'm just going to copy it here. And I'm going to set the quotation mark here, single quotes, from Airbnb underscore data.csv, limit 10. So what did I do here? I selected all the columns using star from the Airbnb underscore data.csv file, and I'm going to limit it to the first 10 rows. So I can either do run by pressing this with my mouse, or shift enter, which is what I will do right now. So as we can see that we have the first 10 rows that have the listing ID, and I can see people saying that they now have access. That's really awesome. Do let us know, everyone, if you can't access. We'll make sure that we fix it. So listing ID, the description is a cozy, budget friendly, cable included, private entrance. What is the host ID, which is a unique identifier? Neighborhoods full, which shows you like Brooklyn, comma, flat lands, for example. Coordinates, which is the latitude and the longitude. Room type, which is a private room, an entire place. The price per night. Total number of reviews an article has received. And a listing has received. Reviews per month. Availability per year, which is in total number of days. What's the average rating it's gotten, the number of stays, and when the listing has been added, right? So kind of repeating what the columns are. And the way we were able to access this data set is by using select star, which says I'm going to select all the columns, so all the things that you see here, from Airbnb underscore data.csv. And it's important that we use quotation mark here if we're using the DataCamp Workspace feature of querying CSV files directly. And we used limit 10 to only see the top 10 results, the first 10 rows. Now, the second thing that I want to show here in SQL is what happens if we want to only look at a few columns. So what if I only want to select the first 10 rows of listing ID, description, and neighborhood full columns? So all we need to do is select, and I'm going to use exactly the column names. So select listing ID, description. So just double checking. Yeah, description is correct. And neighborhood full. So just double check that the name is correct. Neighborhood full. Yeah. From, again, gonna go down a bit. Airbnb underscore Airbnb data dot underscore data dot CSV. So correct file name. And I'm gonna hit limit 10 only to see the first 10 results. So as we can see now, we can see the 3 columns: listing ID, description, and neighborhood full. And again, we use just the same exact query as before. The only difference that we use, instead of star, which says select all the columns, we specified the names of the columns separated by a comma. Now, the third thing that we're going to practice is set an alias for the columns. So you can see here listing underscore ID, description, neighborhood full. I'm a bit of a stickler. I like to have very clean column names. So you can easily set specific column names using SQL by using the as command. So what I'm actually going to do here to make my life a bit easy, I'm going to copy this query, and I'm going to set it here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to break line for all of these different columns. So here, nothing has changed. I just broke line so far. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to assign a new alias, a new column name for each column. So I'm going to select listing ID as, and there's a couple of ways that you can do this. One, without quotes, but if you want to have a space in your column name, you can use quotes. So I need to have space, so I'm going to name it listing ID. Then description, I'm I'm going to just capitalize this one, description. And then here, neighborhood full, I'm going to call this full neighborhood. Okay. From Airbnb underscore data dot CSV limit 10. So as you can see now, we have much better looking column names like listing ID, description, full neighborhood. Now you may ask me, why is this useful, Adele? Imagine you have a data set with dozens and dozens and dozens of columns that have been updated and maintained over years with relatively esoteric column names that require a bit of subject matter expertise and tribal knowledge within the organization. So a good example, a good example would be is oftentimes a big problem finance teams have is that they have different conflicting definitions of revenue, right? And you may have 3 or 4 different revenue columns, right? So if you want to actually name that column appropriately, you may want to give it a bit of more context. Now, the second thing that we're going to do here is we're going to sort the output by number of stays. So let's take a look here in a bit more detail. So I'm going to select all the columns, right? So I'm going to select everything. And all we want to do here is order it by number of stays. So to see at what are the most stayed at or least stayed at listings on Airbnb. So I'm going to select everything using star. I'm going to use from Airbnb underscore data dot CSV. So nothing has changed so far. This is a new command that I'm introducing at the moment, which is order by. So what literally does, it lets you order by a column, which is what we're going to be looking at. Number of stays. Sorry for the scroll here. I just want to make sure that the column name I have is correct. So the number underscore of underscore stays. So apologies again. Sorry for the scroll. Order by number of stays. And then I'm going to limit 10. Let's see if this works. We may need to add one more thing. So perfect. It's working now. And as you can see, it starts off with the lowest number, 1.2 times, right? Because the default is in descending order. But if you want to set it to, I want to start off with the highest apartment with the highest number of stays, all you need to do is add an additional keyword here that says ASC, which means ascending or descending. Yeah, I made a mistake. So the correct default is that it's ascending, which means that it starts from the lowest to the highest. But if I want to start in descending order, where it's from the highest to the lowest, all I need to add is descending. So DESC. So as you can see here, we start off, we see number of stays 612 times. That is the most stayed at apartment. It's a cozy room, family home, has an LG TV. It's LGA next to LaGuardia Airport, no cleaning fee. And if I want to look at the homes with the lowest amount of number of stays, I can remove it and leave it as a default or specify the ASC keyword, which lets me see it from lowest to highest across the board. Now, another thing that I want to show you here is how to filter a data set using SQL. Filtering data sets using SQL is actually quite intuitive because essentially what we're looking at is specific instances where a column fits a particular condition, right? And I stress here the term where a column. And this is why we're going to be using, the reason why is we're going to be using the SQL command where. So what we can do here is we're going to filter on room types that have private rooms, right? So we're going to only look at private rooms, right? And this is a text filter. So we're going to be using, again, select star everything. Oops. From the Airbnb underscore data dot CSV file. And this is where we're going to add a new command, which is the where command, where room underscore type, which is my column that I'm trying to filter on here, is equal, and I use here the double equal sign, which is what is the command that refers to equality in SQL. It's private room. So I need to double check that I've written this correctly, right? Actually, it needs to be a capital R. And then I'm going to look at the top 10 results only. So as we can see, it's been filtered out only on private room. Now, let's say I want to calculate summary metrics, right? Stuff like the average price of all the rooms on these listings, right? Uh, and here it's actually also relatively very straightforward. And kind of as I mentioned early in my discussion, um, it's really like querying using English, right? It's not LLM level querying using English, but it's way more declarative than something like Python, for example, right? So here, what we're going to do is we're going to select the average price. So this is here we're using the average function, right? So it's an average price as average price. So here I'm using again the as command, which lets me set an alias, right? From Airbnb data underscore data dot CSV. So let's go through it again just to make sure that everything is clear. I am selecting the average price as the column name average price from Airbnb underscore data dot CSV. And as you can see here, average price is around $140.2. Now, let's say I want to get the average price per room type. So I want to see what is the room type, what is the average price of private rooms, what is the average price of entire apartments. And this type of grouping and aggregation is actually foundational to data analysis work, right? And here, what comes into play is the group by column. So what I'll first start here is select room underscore type. So here I'm selecting the different room types that I want to look at their average price of. I'm gonna select their average price as average price from Airbnb underscore data dot CSV. Now, if I run it like this, my query will not work, right? The reason why is because we need to group by room type. So to do that, all we need to do is add group by room type. And group by always goes at the end of your query. So here what we're doing is we're telling SQL, I want to see the room type and its average price, but group by the room type. And if we run this query, we'll get the average price of a private room is $81. The average price of a shared room is $68. And the average price of a entire place just for yourself is $193, which makes sense at a high level. Now, with that, before we start answering some questions, I do want to answer your questions. So do send as many questions as possible while I go over again through a summary here of what we just discussed. So we looked at the following commands. The first command is select, which lets us select from our data, which is here the Airbnb underscore data.csv, either all of the rows or a number of rows by which we can set using the limit command. Second thing we looked at is using select to isolate specific columns when we query our data. So we select listing ID, description, neighborhood full, and this helps us get a good idea of it helps us get specific columns that we query from our data set. We're also using the limit command here. Second thing we looked at is assigning column names aliases. So we selected the listing ID column as listing ID, and we used We used quotes here because we have spaces in our columns. We use description as description, neighborhood full as full space neighborhood, and the as column lets us have really clean column names. Now, the other thing that we looked at is ordering by. A common data analysis task is seeing what is the highest or lowest number in a particular column. And by using order by, we look at select. We use the select and the from columns always, but we use all this command. Sorry, but we also use the order by columns, order by column, ascending or descending. So the order by command lets us order by a particular column, and when we can set whether it's an ascending or descending order. Now, here, when we looked at filtering as well, we can definitely filter data sets using SQL by using the where command. What it lets us, how we use it is that we use the where command. We give the condition to the column. So, for example, if this was, isolating on price above 45, we can also do that as well. Now, final things that we looked at are aggregations, where we used average and group by. So to just calculate average without doing calculations, all aggregations, all we need to do is look at the average function, where here we do average price. And then to group by and do aggregations, all we need to do is look at, is add the group by command, which lets us group by a particular column and then calculate aggregations on that particular group by. Now, I see another question. A question here. Great question. When you need to use where, group by, and order by, what is the correct order? We're actually going to check that out shortly. So I'll actually answer that for you in a bit. I see also a question on the recordings. Yes, we will be sending the recordings of this code along. Do not worry about that. If there are any additional questions, do let us know. And I think with that, we can start answering some questions. The first one being listing the top 10 most reviewed private rooms, right? So here, if you think about it as a step back, what we need to look at is the most reviewed, the top 10 reviewed listings that have the room type private room. So if you look at from what we looked at, the type of commands that we looked at to how we can apply it right now, we need to use the select command, the from command. These are always going to be used when we try to query data. And then we need to use the where command to filter. And then we need to use the order by command to sort the final query. And then to get only the top 10, we use the limit with a specified number of rows. So with that, let's get started. So I'm going to query all of the columns using star, right? So first thing, select star. And again, the answer that we're answering here is listing the top 10 most reviewed private rooms. So the data set does not change from Airbnb underscore data.csv. Now, the thing that we need to look at here is room type needs to be a private room. So first thing, we do our condition where room type equal private room. So don't forget here, the R is capitalized. And then what we need to do is make sure that the data that is returned in descending order, because it needs to go from the highest to the lowest. And we need to be ordering by reviews per month. So these are the most reviewed private room listings. So we're going to order by, and we're going to use number underscore of reviews here. And as I mentioned, we're going to use descending since we want it to go from highest to lowest. And then we're going to limit it to the top 10 most reviewed private rooms. So let's see whether that works out. So as we can see here, everything is on private rooms, right? And the number of reviews indeed is in descending order. So these are the top 10 most reviewed private rooms on all of Airbnb New York. Oh, so here someone pointed out order by reviews per month. That is also correct. Probably both can be used here since we're ordering by number of reviews. So here, reviews per month. And as we can see here, indeed, actually, it's quite different. You do get certain listings that have higher reviews per month but lower aggregate reviews. It's great insight here from Echo. Thanks for following along. Question here from Juliana. Is there a reason that we write 2x equals? Indeed. So in like operators that we use in SQL to signify equality, especially in conditions, we use double equals, right? If we are using, for example, let's say we're looking at prices that are above a certain amount, we use the a bigger than sign, for example. So double equal is often used not just in SQL, but other programming languages to signify equality. And that's the reason why we use it instead of regular equals. Now, the second question that we're going to answer is what are the cheapest 10 private rooms in New York? And in a lot of ways, this is a really similar question to the previous ones, at least in terms of how to structure the query. We're going to be using the same exact commands, but different ways by which we use these commands and which columns to use as well. So what we're going to be doing is selecting all the columns, so nothing has changed so far, from Airbnb underscore data.csv. So we're also looking at private rooms. So where room underscore type equals to, let's make sure here, private room. However, the thing that we're ordering by here is price. So we're gonna order by price, and we're gonna focus from the lowest to the highest. So we'll set it as ascending, and then we're gonna limit it to 10. And here we go. So there's a room in Brooklyn that is $0 per night. I find that very hard to believe. This is a data quality issue, most likely. Do check out our courses on data quality. But this is a great way as well for filtering data and ordering by a specific column in SQL. Now, the third question that we're going to look at is the average availability of a private room in New York. And here what we're going to be looking at is combining the average function that we've seen so far with select and from, but also by adding conditions where we look at private rooms only as well. So by adding a filter to the example that we've seen before on using average. So again, select will never change, but the thing that we're looking at here is the average availability of a private room in New York. So we'll do the average function. The column that we're going to be looking at is availability underscore 365. So I'm just going to copy it here. And just to make it easier to read, I'm going to use the as command, and I'm going to call it average availability. So the from has not changed. So from Airbnb underscore dot data dot CSV. The thing that I'm going to add here is a condition. So where room type equals private room. And as you can see, the average availability for listings where the room type is private room is 117 days per year. Now, before we jump to the next set of questions, I'm going to go over again everything that I've just gone far, and do make sure to ask your questions. I do want to make sure to answer every single one. So what we looked at so far is we selected the top 10 most reviewed private rooms. We did that by using the select command, and we used select star, so select all of the columns from Airbnb underscore data.csv, and we used the where column, the where command, sorry, to filter on the room type column, where room type is equal to private room. Then we used order by to order by reviews per month using descending. And then we used limit 10. The second question that we looked at is by looking at the cheapest 10 private rooms. So really similar structure to the query that we looked at before. So the same select command, the same from of the Airbnb underscore data.csv. And we also looked at room type equals private room. The only difference here is that we ordered by price ascending and limited to 10 results. Now, the third question we looked at is what is the average availability of a private room in New York? And to do that, we use the select command, and we selected average availability using the availability underscore 365 column. We used the as command to set an alias for that column as average availability, and we filtered on room type equals the private room. Now, I'm getting a question here. Is it possible to alias the CSV file in the from command? So technically, SQL does not allow you to directly query a CSV file. This is actually a very useful DataCamp workspace feature, right? However, if you want to set an alias for your file moving forward, you can use the here. So for example, this data frame is now available as df12. If you rename it to something else, right, you can query it moving forward as df12, right? Um, and that's like a way that we've also added this useful functionality in DataCamp Workspace to be able to query, to rename your CSV files on the go and give them an alias. I don't see any other questions at the moment, and I think this is a great opportunity as well to jump into the remaining questions, where we'll have at the end a final challenge of a seventh question that I'll let you guys solve on your own. So let's look at the fourth question here, where we're looking at a bit more complex, uh, um, features. So which listings have an availability of fewer than 30 days a year, but have fewer than 10 days? So if you look at here, we're actually uh, adding two filters rather than one. We're adding two conditions. And this is where the AND command comes in. It lets you chain conditions. So let's look at it in a bit more depth and what that looks like here. So I'm going to return only a few select columns just to practice our selecting skills, right? So I'm going to select listing ID. I'm going to select description. I'm going to select availability underscore 365 and number of reviews. And the reason why I'm doing that, one, it lets me see a fewer columns, so let me verify my query a bit easier. But the two columns I'm going to filter by are availability 365 and number of reviews. So also let me double check that my query went okay. So again, I'm selecting these four columns from Airbnb underscore data dot CSV. It's not DSV, it's CSV. And this is where I'm going to use the AND command. So the first filter is that availability underscore 365 needs to be lower than 30 days. So where availability underscore 365 is lower than 30, right? So here I'm using the lower than operator, but have fewer than 10 reviews. So, and I'm going to use and number of reviews in total is less than 10. Now, what I'm going to do as well is I'm going to use the order by command to order by number of reviews descending, because I want to see the most reviewed listings that fit the condition that have less than 30 days available per year and less than 10 reviews in total. So of course, 10 is the maximum, so it needs to be lower than 10. So it's good to see that the highest amount is 9, right? And if we do order by availability 365, we should have the highest number here being either 29 or lower. So we see here 29. Indeed, it is correct. So again, what we did here is we used the same exact where command to filter on two columns, on two conditions, by using and here as well. So fifth question, what is the average number of reviews per room type ordered by the average in descending order? So if we look at this question, let's break it down. What is the average number of reviews per room type ordered by the average in descending order? So I want to look at the average number of reviews for each room type, and I want to see them listed from the room type that has the lowest average number of reviews to the one that has, the highest number average of reviews to the lowest number average of reviews. So this answers an earlier question that we got. What is the order by which you do average, select, group by, order by? Hopefully this will be a great illustration. So first, we're going to select room underscore type. And then we're going to select average, number of reviews as, and here I'm going to show you another example of using aliases. So I've been using aliases all throughout my class, all throughout this session so far, by using the quote section. So here, for example, number of reviews. Let's say I don't care about adding spaces and having clean columns. I can just use underscores. So here, if I call this as average reviews, it will still work. The only time where it won't work without having quotes is when you have a space here. So this is just a fun fact here on how you can use the as command. And then I'm going to do from Airbnb, underscore data.csv. We're going to group by room underscore type. And then we're going to end with an order by. This should be capitalized. So technically you can have it not capitalized. It's just not good code cleanliness. We're going to group by average reviews. So as you can see, I called it here average reviews, right? So I'm going to group by average reviews, descending order. So as you can see, private rooms are 29.8. They have 29.8 on average reviews. Entire place 28.1. And shared rooms are the least reviewed on average with 20.3. So let's break this down in a bit more depth. We selected room type and the average number of reviews and named this average underscore reviews from the Airbnb data underscore CSV. We grouped by room type. And then we ordered by average reviews in descending order. Now, let's go through the final question, which will hopefully get a lot of these together. So, what is the number and average price of listings by room type where such listings are available for more than 250 days a year? So, in order to answer this question, we need to group by room type, compute the average of availability per year, and order by average availability. So we're going to use all of the commands that we've used so far, where we filter on data, where we group by, and we order on by on data. So what we're going to look at is we're going to select first room type. we're going to look at average availability 365, and we're going to call it average availability, right? However, what we want to look at as well is the number of listings by room type. So how do you get the number of listings by room types? Here, what comes into play is the count function. So you do count, and here I'm going to count the number of listing IDs, and I'm going to call the number of listings. So what we've done here is we're grouping by room type. We're calculating the average availability for each room type, and we're calling it average availability. We're also counting the number of unique listing IDs per room type, and we're calling it number of listings. We're at our from Airbnb underscore data.csv. Now, what we want to filter on is listings that are available for more than 250 days a year. So I'm filtering on the availability 365 column. I'm going to copy paste it here just for convenience. So where availability underscore 365 is higher than 250, I'm going to group by room type. And what is the final thing? We're going to order by average availability. So here, I'm ordering by average availability as we set here. So let's run this so we can break it down again line by line. So as we can see, entire place has 313 average availability per year, but has 842 listings, private room 326, shared room 348. So let's break this down in practice and how that looked like a bit more depth. So we selected room type. We added average availability. We want to group, and we grouped by room type. And then aggregate metrics, we looked at our average availability, and then the number of listings per room type. We filtered on room type on listings where availability is above 250, and then we ordered by average availability. Now that leads us to Q&A. If you don't have any questions, we do have this bonus question here, which is, what is the most expensive listing by room type for listings available more than 100 days a year? So I'm going to be taking questions, but at the same time, for those that want to solve this bonus question, I'm going to start a timer. If you send over, or we're starting to get questions, I'm going to start the timer once I say go, right? And we'll shout out the first person to give the answer below. So I'm going to hit start timer. And then once we see here, so do let us know what is the maximum price for the private room, what is the maximum price for entire place, and what is the maximum price for shared room in your results. And once you get it, we'll share your comment on the screen. Now we start getting some answers already, some questions already, sorry. What is the average price? I hope I'm understanding your question. We looked at average price and on top here. So all you need to do to get like aggregate average price is you select average price as average price from the data set to get total average price. We're at 59 seconds. I'm still waiting on the bonus question. Another one from EM Cat here. What is the alias average availability? Can you use the alias, and where do you can you use the alias average availability and where, or do you have to use the original name of the column? That's a great question, actually. Let me double check. So let's just do it here. Yeah, you need to use the alias. I think can only happen after the group by, if I'm not mistaken. Great question, though. Sada, I'm not sure if I get the question. I think we got our first answer. Sarah Cronkist, you're the winner. So Sarah Cronk, I'm going to stop the timer at 126 seconds. Sarah Cronkist has the correct answers. So entire place, $8,000, private room, $1,002, and shared room at $165. So let's see how Sarah solved this particularly. So what we're looking at here is what is the most expensive listing by room type for listing available more than 100 days a year. So we're going to look at select room underscore type to get the overall, and we're going to do a group by here, but to get the maximum of a price within a group, right? Uh, we need to use the max function. So max price as, I'm going to call this here maximum price. So from Airbnb underscore data.csv, where availability. So here, if you look at the filter that we're doing, for listings available more than 100 days a year, so 365 is above 100. Or I think it's actually is moved by room type for listings available more than 100 days a year, if I'm not mistaken. Oh, actually, I think this was supposed to be 250 days a year. I'm sorry about that. Group by 250 and group by room type. And we can see here the correct answers. Or is it group by? Let me double check because I have it here. Oh, yeah, that's my mistake. So where availability underscore 365 is above 100, and the group by room type can be seen here. I made a mistake. So it is indeed, as Sarah Cronkis mentioned, 1,002 for private rooms. For shared room, 165, an entire place, $8,000. That gets pretty expensive, I have to say. And here Sarah is sharing her query, select room type, max price, as and even uses group by one, order by one, which, oh, this is really nice, which lets you see it, another way of adding aliases, another way of using group by and order by, where you can use numbers instead of column names to specify what column number to group by or order by. And that is essentially it for today's code along. If there are any other questions, do let us know in the chat. As I mentioned earlier in my presentation, there's an entire world beyond spreadsheets that is available in SQL, right? From the ability to do automation, the ability to get more efficient results, to scale the type of data that you're working with, and to make your queries more reliable. I highly recommend that if you're a spreadsheet user, a business analyst user who works predominantly with spreadsheets, to up your SQL game, because there's a lot that you can do within spreadsheets using SQL as well. Maybe that'll be the topic of a future code along. And with that, I wanted to give you a few pointers. There's a few extra SQL courses that you can check out in the slides, also in the resources that we're sharing in the chat. You can check out our cheat sheets, which have tons of cheat sheets on SQL. Subscribe to the DataFramed podcast. And then thank you all so much. Have a great day and rest of the week, everyone.